Today's episode is brought to you by the Hippocratic Collective. Check out all our shows and content at hippocratic-collective.com. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. We're excited to have Colin back in the studio with us today, and what we're going to be talking about is something very relevant. This whole system of thinking really changed my life. It took me for a spin when I first heard it as a late PGY3 ENT resident, but honestly, this is something that whether you're in or out of medicine, it's extraordinarily helpful. It can change the way that you move in the workplace and even relate to your work itself. So we love that. It's very important. And Colin's here to kind of like walk us through it, introduce the concept. We'll talk about some different applications and things like that today.
Yeah, excited to be back. Maybe we can blow some more minds.
Yeah, like truly, for context, when Colin first explained this to me, we were doing a lot of running kind of pre-wedding. We were trying to just get really fit for our New Orleans destination wedding. And so we were running at least a mile a day. I'm like a horrible runner. So I would always be like, okay, regale me with some kind of tale. Like Colin is a runner, so he can talk and run at the same time. I am just like 5-alarm fire, kind of the whole jog.
Yeah, that was I guess a fun time. I mean, it was fun for me because, yeah, I could just, we'd have 20, 30 minutes at a time where you just like couldn't say anything. We created Colin's Corner where I got to just say whatever I wanted and, recount facts or stories to you.
Yeah, there was like a lot of U.S. history and like presidential facts in Colin's Corner.
Yeah, you have some like serious gaps in your just kind of basic U.S. history knowledge, so we had to try and film it.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I am definitely a STEM kid, and so there are some holes elsewhere. God doesn't give with both hands.
Right, but when you're just dealing with like, older white male surgeons, they're probably gonna want you to know like, what happened in World War II, so we had to fill you in a little bit.
That has honestly never come up, not one history question in all my years in the OR, but they do want you to know like about, old cop rock, AC/DC type stuff. They want you to be able to recognize that or like know the lead singer or know, what astrological sign the lead singer is of things like that. Alrighty, so the Gervais Principle, first introduced by Venkatesh Rao, and aptly named. It's named after The Office. And I know that he specifies, like, of course, there's a UK version and then the US version. This is primarily based on the US version. And it's helpful to even frame different members of the organization using the US The Office-based model.
Yeah, based on the US Office version, but it's called the Gervais Principle because the UK was created by Ricky Gervais. So
Yep. Okay, go ahead. Kick us off.
Okay, yeah. So Venkatesh Rao, he's a guy that we both really like. He is, we read a lot of his writing. He's kind of like an engineer by trade, but he created a blog and a website called Ribbon Farm, like 15 years ago. It's now defunct, but he still kind of does, a lot of stuff like this. But he has some of these kind of like big idea type pieces that he would, explore over time. So this whole series was written over like 6 or 7 years, like kind of in real time as The Office was on TV. So this is fairly old, but it's, a pretty like universal type idea here. So basically, he was kind of setting out to create a framework to discuss like how can you define organizations, and how can you as a person within an organization kind of understand what that culture is like. So basically, he created this theory centered around The Office because it's, while yes, it's a comedy, it's also like a pretty legitimate look at how just like a standard, boring office operates and kind of the players within that. Um, so his theory is basically that organizations create a culture of what he called individualistic Darwinism. So it's this kind of like dog eat dog, rugged capitalism where just everyone's looking out for themselves. So basically, I'm just going to kind of run through some like definitions here because we'll use some terms throughout this that you'll have to know. So there's three levels of employees. There are sociopaths, clueless, and losers. So most of these don't like mean kind of exactly what you would think in like a colloquial sense. So we'll define them here. But basically, sociopaths like are always looking out for themselves. So in their own best interest, what they're going to do is either sort of knowingly promote overperforming losers into middle management. So that's like your top sales guy gets put into middle management, or they're going to groom like underperforming losers into potential sociopaths down the line. And basically everyone else who doesn't kind of fit into that, they're just going to leave them alone. So those sociopaths, they're at the top of the organization. They're like driving the organization. They're making it function despite whatever kind of lies beneath it. The clueless are just the middle managers. So that's the Michael Scott. They're like the company men, unfailingly loyal. And then the losers, they're not necessarily losers in like a social sense, but in an economic one. So essentially they've entered into a poor economic agreement. And this can be due to, economic or social factors. So it might be that they have to take this, day-to-day salary or hourly job because of many factors. But what they've done is given up that high income earning potential to collect a steady paycheck. So these are the actual producers and kind of laborers at the bottom of the organization there. So yeah, I mean, how do these people kind of interact? The sociopaths, yeah, like I said, they're really all just going to look out for themselves. They also have kind of the highest level of freedom. So they can come in and out of an organization basically whenever they want, right? So in the office, best example of this is David Wallace, who's I think like the VP of something at Dunder Mifflin. The losers, they're probably not going to have actual loyalty to the organization, but they might have a high level of loyalty to themselves. So like the losers will often kind of form, in groups within their own, class. This is like most people on The Office. So this is going to be Jim, Stanley, Kevin, Meredith, all those people. And then the clueless are, those middle managers. So they might even have been high producing losers. Like, so Michael Scott, his backstory is he was actually like a pretty good salesman. But he was promoted into the middle management class. He lacks sort of the social and organizational skills to actually maneuver to the top. So he's basically firmly stuck in the middle. There's no way he's going to get up and down. And the people at the top are pretty aware of this, and they're going to sort of utilize them, however they can there.
Okay, that all is good overview. I think that where it really hit home for me, I love the three different types of like talk. So power talk, game talk, and baby talk. It really it helped give me language and also some of my own context for like how different conversations occur in the workplace, and also like how should I feel about the conversation. I think that that's what I would say helped me a lot, because at the end of the day, just like not all conversations in the workplace hold equal weight, have equal potential, right? So because I couldn't differentiate between those before, even if it was like a pretty meaningless conversation, you could just like discard it if you wanted to after that interaction, I could never tell what was an important or an unimportant conversation. And so like these three types of talks, I would ask you to kind of go over those, Colin. And then I want to get into, the Jim and David scene on David's basketball court.
Yeah. So like the reason why it's even helpful to define these is because of what you're saying, right? Like how do you then sort of practically put that into place? Because if you can't really see the chessboard and who has power or who doesn't, then you're going to get bogged down. And it can be, I think, the reason why we talked about this a lot, in a medical, in a hospital setting, there are a ton of moving parts, and there's tons of different layers and different groups within the organization, and it can be very hard to see, where all these pieces fit in. So basically those three kind of classes that we outlined there, they all interact with each other differently, right? So the modes of language that you're talking about, the first one is power talk. So this is basically how the sociopaths would communicate with each other. The reason why we call it power talk is because there are actual stakes to the conversation. So certainly there could be two people at the top of an organization having a conversation that's not power talk. It's not that everything they say is, or falls into that category. They could just be talking about the weather. But and we'll give some examples later. But the idea is that, information is exchanging hands, like word to word, sentence to sentence. And there is this like actual kind of interplay of power being exchanged during that conversation. The second is...
Yeah, but inherently, I just want to call out, inherently, by definition, one or both players needs to actually have power.
And there has to be something at stake. So, if you're not offering or potentially offering something up, then it kind of doesn't matter, right? So either you have some sort of secret or you have information that the other person's trying to get, and you're both trying to get that out of each other. Because even again, if it's two people with power just talking about nothing, it doesn't really matter. It's more of like, am I putting my chips on the table for this conversation?
Okay, I disagree. I would push back on that because I'm much more of like the challenger school of thought. Like, are we talking about tennis right now? To me, it's not like what's being offered up as stakes in the conversation. It's just that if somebody with power, real power in the organization shows up to a conversation, like, you need to know that there's an element of power talk at play.
Yeah, I think you can kind of loosely define what the stakes are to broaden it however you want. Because like certainly any conversation you're having with the CEO or the chair or something, they could be scouting you for something. So
exactly.
You could kind of put it to that. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's just like if you're having a conversation with the chair or like a really high-ranking attending, right, who has a lot of power in your department, like, even if you aren't coming to them offering something, you don't outright know what the stakes are. Just know that if you're like word vomiting and like bumbling through the conversation, your stock is probably going down, like because of the power dynamics at play. So I just wanted to call that out from the power talk standpoint.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that is that if you're not already in that position, right? And the reason why it's kind of like the in-group language for sociopaths, because if you're not in that class, a lot of times it's going to be kind of one-way conversation, right? Where that person at the top is more just going to be talking to you. And yeah, sure, you can maybe respond or something, but like there's no information that they want from you. So it's not like they're even offering up anything. Yes, there is an element of like, hey, you need to be presentable. And that's more of an opportunity to kind of show, like we can talk about that.
Yeah,
like
we'll talk about the gym
but
basketball one too, though, where like if you see an opportunity, you can take it. But guess what? If you're talking to like an important person or the chair or the boss or whoever, and you aren't like on the lookout for opportunities, you're definitely not going to see or take an opportunity that you don't even know is presenting itself. So go ahead. I'll let you do game and baby talk.
Okay, well, so the second one would be posture talk. So this is basically like fake power talk. So this is what the clueless are using to speak to like pretty much everyone. They are kind of mimicking what they think is power talk, but there's no teeth to it, right? They don't have actual power. There's not real stakes to the conversation. And typically people are not going to take them that seriously. And they may or may not realize that. So this is like the thing that can then sort of catch you up, right? Because if you can't recognize that something is posture talk versus power talk, it's going to be hard to differentiate and sort of decide where do I need to put my energy? How seriously do I need to take something? Because you're going to hear a lot of this, and if you can't cut through that, it's going to be pretty mentally taxing. So this is, Michael Scott blustering about we got to do X, Y, and Z, where he's always calling people into the conference room. And then, Stanley's just doing his crossword puzzle because he correctly recognizes that Michael can't really make him do anything.
Yeah, and I'm like the poster child of just getting bogged down in conversations or interactions that don't carry any weight or, move the needle in any way. So for me, recognizing that posture talk exists and then being able to like correctly identify, okay, this is just posture talk, super helpful. That took off a significant mental load. And like an immediate example that comes to mind when we talk about attendings in a department, it's just like if you've ever worked at a hospital or at an institution within a department, there are attendings who have power and there are attendings who do not have power. Obviously we know which bucket everyone wants to fall in, but just like this organizational thinking is just based on reality. So for those attendings who don't have power, it's posture talk. When they do have power, it's power talk. But the way that I would then relate to those people actually shifted according to the amount of power that they had or did not have, and it freed up just so much mental bandwidth.
Yeah, and that's really what you're trying to do here. And then the third piece is kind of like the response to that. So if you can recognize, okay, who do I need to take seriously or not? The third sort of version here is what he called baby talk. So this is spoken by the losers or even like the sociopaths to the clueless. So this again sounds like power or posture talk to the clueless, but you're in on the joke, right? Like you are humoring them, but you're not taking it that seriously, or you're letting them have some little win so they think they're kind of maintaining the power. And it is, I think what got you hung up like early on was that like you just saw things like this is right or wrong, this is kind of black or white. So if someone is saying something or behaving in a certain way, like I have to just take this head on and I'm going to put all my energy into dealing with this, whereas really just kind of like sometimes if you just kind of capitulate and say, hey, yeah, sure, of course that's how we're going to do it, and then that they can't actually follow through on that and make you do it, it's just going to save everyone a lot of headache and kind of keep them from exploding or, targeting you, right? So, I mean, I feel like to some people that's going to sound kind of dirty or sleazy to almost just say one thing and then, not take it seriously. But that's why The Office is like a really good example, because if you're actually in an office with Michael Scott, and obviously Michael Scott's like a pretty extreme example, but let's say you were literally working in that office and you had to go in every single day and you took everything completely seriously that he said. I mean, you'd be Dwight basically, right? And Dwight is kind of crazy.
Yeah, you don't want to be Dwight. No, I don't think that it's that extreme. Like we had an attending who straight up would like brag, oh, I've been told that I'm a lot like Michael Scott. Like, I haven't seen The Office, but, like, people tell me that all the time, and they had me play him in a skit. I mean, like, that's very real. And so to your point about, like, it's not that serious, is, like, it's very hard to be an effective person in the workplace if you are getting bogged down by Michael Scott and people like him. And so I don't even think of it, you used kind of like a duplicitous, sinister example. And certainly in the patient care setting, obviously, even though I don't practice clinical medicine anymore, I'm going to say like, yeah, you should never be like, oh, that sounds good. Like, we'll do that plan. And then like not give the person that medication. Like, it's not like that. I just think of it as more of, let's say that the Michael Scott like attending is just going on and on about, well, did you read this textbook by this famous person? And then they're just going on about like the history and lore of this famous person. And it just doesn't matter. Like that person has no power. And also what they're talking about is like totally inconsequential, has no bearing on like patient care or like the tasks of the group. Then in those situations, yeah, it's totally fine to, instead of like taking it seriously and being like, no, I'm pretty sure that person trained at this program and not this program. That just doesn't matter at all. So I got very good at, in those situations, using baby talk. And again, that clueless middle management person, they're going to think it's posture talk or the language that they use. So they'll be placated and you can just like move on with your day.
Yeah. And to be clear, because I don't know that we really defined this at the beginning, but pretty much all residents, even most kind of early attendings, everyone, you're pretty firmly in this like loser class, right? Because you're likely underpaid, right? You're, especially the residents, right? You're getting paid this like minimum salary to show up and work all these hours. You already have your MD, but the way that the system works is you have to complete a residency if you want to practice at the end of the day in most cases. So you are stuck in this situation. And there are multiple layers to the types of people you're going to be interacting with, but we framed this conversation in a way that's like mostly speaking to medical students, residents, early attendings, people that are not at the top of the food chain.
And then what's the in-group language for all the losers?
Yeah, it's called like game talk, and that's kind of like just a general thing, right? So basically that's a lot of, I mean, that can be defined like a ton of different ways, but it's really just often, in any workplace, you're going to have these kind of little groups. It can be a way to kind of cope with what you're dealing with. So in some cases, it can be kind of like high school cliquey, right? Where they might even sort of develop a specific way, or even a way that they're maybe making fun of the boss, or they're kind of talking around it. But it's done in a way to kind of build cohesion within the loser class, right? Because the ones that are kind of know they're going to be there for a long time, the ones that are just sort of accepting it, they're often going to try and form like the strongest bonds within that loser class, because that is kind of what's going to get them through the day, right? And like it can also be a thing that bogs people down that aren't super interested in that as well. So if you get hung up, that's the classic Andy scenario, right? When he comes into the office and he's trying to join all those groups, he's so obsessed with getting into, what do they call it, the finer things club, right? And he's trying to join all this stuff, and like nobody really wants him in there, and like he's spending all of his energy just trying to infiltrate these loser groups, and has just no understanding that would not help him at all within the organization at large.
Right, exactly. And I certainly, I mean, I can relate to that. I think like most conversation that occurs in a resident office is, game talk. It's just like this understanding, like, okay, we all know our fate. We're all stuck here. None of us are really happy about it. But yeah, that's very true. I just think that even like if some of your co-residents have one of those little cliques going on in residency, like, yeah, that's a side quest. That doesn't really advance your position in the majority of cases to be a part of their finer things club and things like that. So I want to use Jim, obviously one of like the better known characters, one of the more central people. I want to use him as an example because I feel like he does all of these different types of talk pretty well. Like I can just easily see. So Jim is very skilled at game talk. Like when he is talking to other people, he's talking to Oscar, he's talking to, Pam. Like honestly, Jim and Pam both being members of the loser class, those, especially earlier season interactions, are good examples of like game talk. They kind of see the system that they're in. Pretty much any time that Jim talks to Michael Scott or even Dwight, it's baby talk. Right? Because they take themselves very seriously. He sees beyond it. He uses baby talk. Doesn't take that too seriously. And then Jim is actually pretty good at, I mean, he gets better at, because I can think of a time where he was like golfing with a client and did not kill it. But with David Wallace, there's like a really iconic scene where Jim pulls off like the perfect power talk. And I still think of this scene sometimes even today. I think it's a good reference for like running the perfect game in power talk.
It's at I guess David Wallace is
David
like,
Wallace's house.
yeah, he's hosting like a dinner party or something.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's right when Michael and Jan start dating.
yeah, exactly. So there are, all these rumors. I mean, not even rumors. It's like pretty confirmed, right? Because they actually send out some emails or something. But David Wallace doesn't quite know what's going on, but he's pretty aware, and he thinks that something's going on between Michael Scott and Jan. And Jan is Michael Scott's boss, so he's trying to get to the bottom of it here. And he's also, I think,
they show up to the party together, so he knows that they're together.
Okay, yeah. And I think he's also interested in Jim and kind of is feeling him out a little bit as well. But during the party, like David asks Jim if he wants to go outside and shoot some hoops. So they go outside and they play basketball a little bit and they're just messing around. And David kind of flat out, asks him, hey, what's, so almost jokingly like, hey, what's going on with, Michael and Jan? And Jim has some choices here, right? He could either just be like, oh, wow, okay, because he knows everything that's going on. So he could say, oh, let me give you all the details here. I'll spill everything. He could lie and cover up and try and help Michael. But what he does, he basically, he kind of laughs. He takes a pause and he just says, oh man, I won't even know where to begin. And that's it. And David Wallace just kind of smiles back at him and, they just sort of nod and keep shooting hoops. And that's kind of the end of the conversation, right? He effectively communicates that, yes, he knows what's going on. 2, he's not stupid enough to just give up all the information and tell him everything. But also he's leaving the door open, right? He's kind of saying, hey, I'm willing to barter for this, right? I'll give up this information if I get something in return, but I'm not gonna play all my cards here because you have not offered anything to me yet. And then on the flip side, David Wallace knows not to press him about it, right? He's not going to continue to grill him because he already got his confirmation. He knows that something's going on and that he needs to look into it, confirmed by Jim, but Jim is not complicit in this. There was nothing that can sort of be traced back to him. And that is then sort of a knowing recognition from David Wallace, like, okay, Jim kind of gets it here. This is a guy to look at in the future.
Yeah, which we see play out over the next several seasons. Like, Jim positions himself well to where David Wallace trusts him. He has his back in various scenarios. And, I think that there's such an art to that in a way where a lot of us, especially like when neurodivergent, I needed the art really clearly explained to me, and like I needed examples of it that I could reference and really like mull over and understand better. Because it used to be very, very common in my program where an attending, like you'd be operating and they'd be like, how's this, what do you think of this student? Right? The student rotating with us. What do you think of this junior resident? What do you think of this senior resident? And depending on which attending is asking, it might be power talk, it might be posture talk. But one of my favorite quotes of this season is just, power is not power if you do not know you have it. And so I think that these are all helpful examples. Another one that I would want to call out, like another character arc that's helpful for looking at all of this, is really BJ Novak's character, which I guess he's Ryan of Ryan and Kelly on The Office. Right?
Yeah. And to kind of wrap up the Jim one too, like the tough part with this is that you can't really practice that, right? That situation, sure, you can like think through, oh, if I was put in this or that situation, what would I do? But they're all going to be different and it's all pretty real time. And so a lot of it is just, you have to practice by doing it, right? So you might only get so many opportunities and sometimes it's not going to go well, but half the battle is just even post-mortem understanding, oh, that was an important conversation. Maybe I could have done this or that, and then learning from that. And so that's why like defining this stuff and kind of dissecting it is helpful to understand, oh, that conversation that I didn't think, oh, actually that doesn't really matter that much. I don't have to think about that. Let me dissect this one a little bit more. And next time something like this comes around, I will be more prepared for it. Yeah. So Ryan and Jim really are the kind of two, they're in the loser class, but they have this kind of sociopath potential. Jim sort of makes his way there towards the end, but ultimately he has kind of too strong of loyalties, to other people within that class, and he's maybe just a little bit too nice of a guy to kind of cut through people.
Yeah, he's definitely not the perfect sociopath. And like you see that even though he does ultimately climb the ladder, it just takes like so long and it's kind of the traditional way and it's not super effective.
Yeah, right. Like
But
he
Ryan,
turns down his position to like stay and be with Pam and stuff like that. Ryan, yeah, does not care at all, right? Even when we're first introduced to him, Dwight and Michael are always trying to bring him in and give him nicknames and stuff, and he's constantly resisting it. He does not want to be part of that group. He, whether or not he sort of explicitly knows it, he is pretty aptly keeping himself out of the weeds and just, hey, I'm here for a job. I really have no interest in being friends with these people. That's it. And then he ultimately kind of pulls this maneuver where in that scenario where Jim and Michael and what's Rashida Jones's character, they're all applying to take Jan's job. And ultimately it ends up going to Ryan, right? And he jumps everyone and sort of climbs right into that class by basically just throwing it all out on the table, right?
he did have an MBA.
Right.
He was getting an MBA. And yeah, exactly. I feel like so he kind of denied game talk from other like losers in his class. He did a lot of posture talk, just like blowing off Michael and Dwight and their games.
Yeah, and once he gets that position and sort of the downfall of Ryan, you can see he is potentially kind of a true sociopath anyway. And really does not care about screwing people over and doing everything to get what he wants. And that's sort of, it's, you don't see his interview and stuff like that, but it's kind of implied that is what gets him on the radar, right? He has big ideas. He's willing to be a little bit cutthroat in a way that some of these other people might not. And really the way that, you can kind of make that jump, right? Because ultimately, getting back to what this loser class is, again, you've entered into kind of a bad economic agreement. So trying really hard, and Ryan does nothing, right? He's never made a sale or something, right? He's like a terrible salesman. So you would think, oh, this is the worst guy in the company. Why would he be promoted? But, because you've entered into that agreement, you really shouldn't be trying very hard, right? You're just there to kind of collect your salary. You should kind of do what you have to do to keep the job and spend all of your extra time and resources doing other things. So in this case, Ryan was spending his extra time not going on an extra sales call and worrying about what was going to happen the next morning. He was like going to night school or something, right? He was getting his MBA. So he was already planning for the future and like what was the next leap going to be. And being able to kind of like sustain that pressure of, hey, I'm not giving forth the best effort here, but I'm still here. I'm not like breaking down. I'm dealing with it. That kind of shows like a mental toughness, basically, that is potentially going to get you on the radar of one of the sociopaths, just by being able to showcase, hey, I understand what the system is about. I'm not going to waste my time doing what all these other people are doing, what the clueless are doing. I am going to spend my time focusing on what's going to help me, or even ultimately what is going to help the organization at large.
Yeah, because I also think of like, there's the party planning committee. There are other subcommittees. There's just like a lot going on in the loser class, and Ryan really stays out of the fray. I also think, just like for clarity, especially when we think of like residents, there's like a party planning committee sometimes in different residency programs and stuff like that. I do think that there's absolutely like a role for that. There's meaning in that. I think Colin and I, at the end of the day, though, we're just saying, be aware of what you're doing. Like, there's nothing wrong with joining a party planning committee, but then that's fine. Like, assign it the correct place, both within the organization and like within your career and your life and things like that. Because I just think what gets people really bogged down is when they can't tease out these different power dynamics that are inherent in any hierarchy or organization.
Yeah, it all depends on your goal as well. If you're like, hey, I'm just going to I just want to practice medicine and I don't care about making that much money or whatever. And, I'm just happy to get through this and, live my life, then great. You don't have to do any of this scheming type of stuff. Certainly knowing all this would help you maybe get through difficult situations. But yeah, if your end goal is to do, you want to be the chair of a department or you want to own your own practice and make tons and tons of money, this stuff is like pretty necessary, right? Because either you can be like Kevin, who plays in a band in his spare time and he just kind of messes around. Not that you can't have hobbies, but certainly he is not maximizing his ability or capabilities. Kevin might be, but if you are a resident, you're feeling like, oh my God, I just have no time. I have these big goals, but I'm just bogged down in all this admin work and stuff like that. There might be a real conversation you need to have with yourself about, hey, I'm spending so much time doing all these really detailed notes. Am I willing to do less detailed notes and save some time here? It's a potential risk, right? I might get in trouble for it, but if I'm able to save an hour, 2 hours a day by doing that, in which I could invest my time into another thing that I'm interested in, that might be worth the trade-off. Obviously, there is some inherent risk to doing that, but that is sort of that's the potential launching pad, right? That could literally be the difference of just getting stuck kind of in that one mode forever or taking a bigger risk and being able to jump out of that later.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, and maybe the haters online are getting to me, but when we talk about these very real organizational things, I bristle as much as any physician bristles at like the thought of, okay, we'll just make your notes a little bit poorer. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, I'm never going to sign off on that. I just got really fast and efficient. Like, I built different systems into my day to where I still got like really high quality, thorough notes done in a timely fashion, like never brought notes home. But it is so funny because this is why I think doctors are so far behind, because like we don't allow ourselves to like have this conversation. I will say I know a lot of colleagues who were surgical specialists, all men, and their notes would be like 5 to 10 words for an HPI, whether that's like a returning clinic note or this or that. And like, I never did that. Like, you would see 1 to 2 paragraphs, kind of the standard, but it's just so funny because even though I've literally seen what Colin's describing play out, I would not, it's tough because at the end of the day, you can't unlearn, like, I wouldn't condone it. I've seen it literally a lot of the time. I've seen, especially men, do their notes that way, rise up the ladder, make it to the power talk levels. But there's an interesting like paradox going on where these are different ways for you to play it to succeed, yet physicians are not allowed to play it this way, yet some are, and they're finding positive outcomes because of it. I don't know. Did I just loop myself into like a spiral about this?
No. And I mean, that is like that's kind of the Jim arc, right? Because he could take this job and not screw over some other people, but he would basically leave people behind. And that's what's happening, right? If you're going to ultimately kind of cut corners, basically, right? It is going to be serving your best interest, but there are certainly ramifications on the backside of whatever you're doing. But realistically, I mean, that's why this theory of organizations makes a lot of sense, right? We said at the top, it creates this dog eat dog world. And it's either I'm looking out for myself or I'm probably getting taken advantage of by something else. And that's exactly what happens. Like, it really is, right? And that's what happens with residents. For instance, you really liked having control, as much control over your schedule as you could, which is almost nothing in residency. But when you were a senior resident, you got to set the schedule for the residents, right? So you took on that duty and you told everyone, hey, I'm happy, because most people didn't want to do it, right? It's like a big extra admin burden. You took that on and you would spend a decent amount of time making the schedule, not just for yourself, but for everyone. Weekly schedules. That was something that you chose to do to kind of make your day-to-day more bearable, but it took up your weekends, right? I'm not saying it took
I
like
did the
8
call
hours,
schedule for both 4th and 5th year. since we were missing that class. But like, I totally agree. And it probably ate up a lot of my extra time. Although, like I said, and going back to like some of our own idiosyncrasies and sometimes neurodivergence, like the unknown for scheduling and like not having any control and then just like being assigned random, dates for call, that would make me that would just be so unpleasant for me that I was like, I'll just give up like a few hours of my time weekly
Yeah.
to do this. And so, but I agree. But that one's hard to like get rid of that programming. It'd be obviously advantageous if I was a different person and had
I think you did the correct
personality.
math, and if I don't have any control over my schedule, I will spend more time worrying
Like
about
complaining.
it.
Yeah, then the time worrying before it came out and the time complaining after it came out,
Right.
honestly probably would have like
Right.
exceeded the other time.
But
And
but what also comes with that, people knew you made the schedule, which means you got calls, text, you got attendings asking about it.
Yeah.
You got tons of other stuff that came along with that, not just a few hours where you had to sit down and like map out your spreadsheet. So it became a serious administrative burden that you willingly took on, and you could have been like writing a book in the
No, I
meantime.
get it, but I mean that now we've really like crossed over into the existential. Like, I don't disagree with you, but it would have required a personality transplant for that to be the case, and like science hasn't gotten there yet. Like, of
Sure.
course, at every point in my life, I'd be like, oh, if it was an option to get one of those,
Right, but yeah, and this is maybe too specific of a thing to you, but yeah, certainly in any residency though, they're always looking to extract as much time and labor from you as you can. So you mentioned the party planning committee. That's great. If you get a lot of joy out of doing that and that's going to make it better, that's great. But yeah, that might then mean, oh, okay, I no longer have time to pursue this research project, which would ingratiate me with this specific attending that I would like to get a letter of recommendation from. You might literally be trading that time off. It's not explicit like that, oh, I can either do one or the other, but because you're spending several hours a week doing one thing that's just for that resident class, and that's not going on your resume, right? That's not going to get you a job. Those are the decisions that have to be made. Is this something that I want to pursue relentlessly, or am I just happy to kind of make my day-to-day and my fellow residents or group, make it more bearable?
Yeah, and I think that what's tough about like party planning committee is that I've never seen it go well. Like, all I've ever seen result from that is often even like resentment on the part of the co-resident who spearheads it, because you don't get like a special award for successfully planning like an outing, and there's often middling interest. It just really, I mean, obviously we had one specific experience in a department, but it was really like too hard to overcome the activation energy and also like a lot of the bad blood within the department. And so people who were trying to plan these things were often just spinning their wheels.
Yeah, I mean, I feel in this type of conversation, like I always say the same thing, which is your job it's not to be the best medical student or the best resident. You're not going to be those things moving forward. This is a stepping stone. So spending all of your time going above and beyond resident, it's like, pick your spot. If you need to go above and beyond in a certain thing, make sure that it is very targeted and it is to get something for your next goal, whatever that next thing you want to get is. Because, I just think it's so all encompassing that it's really easy to get bogged down in it and spend so much extra time just being like a resident. This is just training to become your own full-time attending. So think of it that way. It's, unfortunately is what it is, but you're probably going to be better in the long run if you're looking out for yourself a little bit more. The system is inherently pretty broken, and they are in any organization, not just, residency or medical, whatever, but they're there to basically take advantage of you. If you can resist that, look out for yourself, spend your time on things that matter. Using these tools can really help.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Well, hopefully you guys found some very usable, applicable pearls from today's conversation, but I do think that this ongoing one about organizational dynamics is very important, such a superpower for young people going into medicine. Thanks for being here today, Colin.
Yeah, of course.
You had to be here. You were called and you answered the call since I know where you live.
Yeah. I can't really say no. But that's okay.
And I have access to your calendar, so you can't be like, that's so weird. I'm booked at that time.
Also true.
Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Frances Mei MD. Check out our website, hippocratic-collective.com, for more shows and content like this. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And remember, power is not power if you don't know you have it.